Hello to everyone, hope you're having a great new year and welcome back into the channel and thank you so much for tuning in. So this video marks the beginning of our series review of the Swamp Thing, starting at the pilot episode of the CW series. Per usual, these reviews will be dropping on the weekends as a part of our Swamp Thing special, wherein we discuss various details of the show, which will be filled full of spoilers, so keep in mind for that. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Very few, if any, comic book based shows have been able to capture that specific tone necessary to hold the attention of the audience quite like the Swamp Thing does. The series was created by Gary Dauberman and Mark Verheiden, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, in order to be a DC property that can blend well into the other DC shows. And it is Gary Dauberman's writing that brought the Conjuring universe to life, that helped to set this pilot episode apart from his DC counterparts. The show starts off with a small crew of men on a boat deep in the swamp at night, dropping off mysterious devices into the water. Not long after they reach an area said to be a previous drop site, that their engine stalls, and something begins to assault the boat from under the water. The plant life seems to have taken on a life of its own, moving and twisting in ways that are straight out of a Stephen King novel. And by the end of the opening sequence, you're left to one question: was that science or the supernatural? In the following scene, we join the daughter of one of the crewmen from the night before, Susie Coyle, played by Ellie Graham, who does a phenomenal job with her role in the series, as we transition from the swamp. While hearing about a fairy tale that may be symbolizing a giant king with the darkness in the swamp, she coughs up a black substance before passing out, letting us know that whatever is happening in the swamp is starting to branch out. We are then introduced to Abby Arcane, played by Crystal Reed, who was on assignment by the CDC in the Congo. And from this one scene, the audience immediately knows that Abby Arcane is not one who colors inside the lines, that she will take risks to help those in need if necessary, which is why later she thinks that her friend Harlan, played by Leonardo Nam, has some words for her. But we learn that his take is quite the opposite, that she helped to save those kids instead. Now this is when she and Harlan receive their assignment from the Atlanta CDC, which just happens to be in her hometown, Murray. It's not long after Abby enters Murray on her way to the hospital that it is clear that whatever history she's left there still lingers. Murray seems to be one of those towns that time has forgotten. And like any good show worth its weight in salt, the town is a character in and of itself, but one that we later learn has always had something brewing underneath. Not long after her arrival to the hospital, Abby enters Susie's room and discovers some strange vegetation on Susie's bed. She hands the sample to the head doctor, played by Tim Russ from Star Trek fame, which honestly gave the show a bit more weight as it starts to flex the star power muscles. And it is by way of an offhand interaction between Abby and a rather peculiar gentleman that we are introduced to our co-protagonist, Alec Holland, played by Andy Bean from the Starz TV show Power. Abby initially assumes he's a thief, and even though she doesn't know it yet, Alec will become a far more valuable ally than both could ever know. We then transition to Susie's home, where we are introduced to Matt Cable, played by Henderson Wade, who I remember as Halle Berry's son from the show Extant. The creepy vibe is dialed up after the two enter the home to investigate, and the plant life on the wall begins to squirm and move. But if you were paying attention, the plant life matches what was on Susie's bed. There's a strange noise coming from the bedroom as Matt startles Alec Holland, who was in the process of gathering samples. Matt wants to know why he's there, to which Alec replies,
"You're focusing on the wrong thing here.
This scene and the upcoming autopsy scene stands head and shoulders among quite a few other shows when it comes to creep factor being used in storytelling that really adds to the texture of the show. Shortly afterwards, Abby and Alec meet outside, informing her that he's been seeing that type of crazy biological process for some time, and that it could connect with what she's been trying to treat at the hospital. He convinces her to come out to his lab, funded by Avery Sunderland, and shows Abby just what 3 drops of the growth accelerant can do. As it turns out, Alec was at the fisherman's house to compare the latest samples from what he took from the swamp to what he got from Susie's house. This prompts Abby to tell Alec to meet with her again at the hospital. We are then introduced to Avery Sunderland, played by Will Patton, who's been in a ton of stuff, just take your pick. Avery Sunderland is trying to appeal to the worried townsfolk, telling them that the research into the swamp could potentially save the town by producing all sorts of applications, that Murray is his home as well, and it is clear from this scene that Avery is top brass in town. Alec tells Avery about his findings, to which Avery insinuates that Alec keep it under wraps. Now we then transition to Abby at the morgue, in a scene that pays heavy homage to horror classics like John Carpenter's The Thing, which, considering the name of this show, is quite deliberately meta for sure. After Abby extracts a sample from the fisherman's body, Alec gives it a few drops. Mysteriously, both Susie and her father's body somehow remotely respond to the drops of mutagen. The scene is grotesque and sprinkles in another touch of horror to DC we haven't seen done so well before. And just like in the movie The Thing, Alec uses fire to destroy the growth accelerant reaction. After Abby and Alec share a brief moment showing that there could be just a little bit more under the surface between the two, we then transition over to Murray's main hangout spot, Delroy's. She intends on getting some answers from her childhood friend named Liz, who writes for the local paper, played by Maria Sten. Liz tells Abby that there aren't too many people talking, but she did overhear that people have been hired to go out into the swamp at night. And just before Skeeter Cove is name dropped, Maria Sunderland, played by Virginia Madsen, who also has been in a slew of movies and television, comes over to confront Abby about her now deceased daughter. Maria has not been able to let it go and still holds a grudge, especially against Abby, who was her daughter's best friend and there during the time of her death. Abby and Alec head over to Skeeter's Cove and do manage to find the mysterious boxes from the opening scene. Later, they meet back in Alec's lab, where Abby basically admits that she's responsible for her friend's death. Alec then tells Abby that he can locate the remaining boxes by GPS. Shortly after, while Alec is locating the boxes, he is met by a stranger and is shot. The gunman then launches a stick of dynamite into the boat, causing a severely wounded Alec to fall overboard to avoid the incoming explosion. While under the water, the accelerated plant life is seen merging with Alec, and as Abby arrives to find Alec's boat on fire, the plant life reacts the same way that it did in the opening scene, only this time the plant life retreats. But at the height of her confusion, she then thinks she's being chased by a creature, not knowing that it was the man formerly known as Alec Holland. The very ending of this episode, just like any good show, introduces us to compelling characters, as well as give us just enough to want to continue to solve the mysteries of what is going on in the show. That just about does it for this review/discussion. Make sure you stay tuned in the Content Meta for more reviews like this. If you liked the video, please leave a like and a comment down below, and make sure you hit that subscribe button. Join us next week as we discuss the details of the second episode for this show. And until then, see you then.